hope, Anna, that we will be able to use what was at the very end said in Polish, but I will say it in English, what Prime Minister Cimoszewicz said, yes, we can make it. And I think we will try to prove that we can make it. We are here on equal footing, so we are supposed to criticize each other and to disagree with each other. I'm afraid we might not deliver on this too much, but I would just like to say that Anna de Palacio is a sort of long-term friend of Poland. We worked together in the convention, but she has always been very active as opinion maker. She's publishing a lot, nearly weekly, articles on Europe and on how to make it, how to bring Europe back to the citizens, and how to not only survive, but how to make Europe great and important again. And we are here to discuss, Anna, we are here to discuss one of those issues where we don't have yet, if I can say it, final solution in Europe, where we are actually still facing a lot of difficulties in finding a solution to migration. It's true that we have had, over the last years, unprecedented flows of people coming to Europe. We try to differentiate between the migrants in general and the refugees, and you are also an international lawyer. It is clear that there are international conventions, there is Geneva Convention, there are laws in all member states which make it clear that on refugees we have not much choice in terms of having the right or not to accept them. So that's why this difference between migration and refugees is very important. But I also think that from the point of view of ordinary citizens of Europe, of people, it doesn't matter. They don't differentiate between who is refugee, who is just migrant. And I would also like to maybe start with my comments with saying that, yes, indeed, we have a problem in Europe. We say crisis. That means that there is a need of having good policies, and we are not really coping with this enormous challenge, which is both, I think, a problem and an opportunity. And this is not, that would be my first opinion, that it is not the problem of the numbers, of the volume of the challenge. It's not because there are so many migrants, but I think it is because we just simply do not want them, and we do not want them because we are not prepared, we don't have capacities to cope, we are not prepared in terms of institutional solutions. We have political elites in many member states that are not ready to play a positive approach towards the challenge, to work with others, to show solidarity. So I think that we do not see the migrants coming as an opportunity for us to maintain our living standards. And that's why I think we do have a problem here, and it's dominating over the opportunity approach to the migration. I don't know what you think of all that.
Thank you, Danuta. Even if time is the scarcest commodity, I have this, and I know that there will be a gong, and then we will be cut off from you. Just thank you. Thank you for inviting me. Thank you for the organizers. And you know, for me, it's important to come after Vladimir Cimoszewicz, who I had the pleasure, the honor, and to have as counterpart when I was in government. And you said, since when we go back? We go back to the white paper on the enlargement to the east, 94, when it was published. And this is how long we go back, Danuta. And so many things have happened. And I fully agree with Cimoszewicz. She says, basta of gloom and doom. We have to act, and we have to take a forceful position forward. Now, I will start by just responding to your provocation. Numbers do not matter, you say. It's a matter of elites. Well, I think numbers matter. And I'm coming from a country, Vladimir Cimoszewicz mentioned Sweden. Sweden has 18% or 18 point something percent of the population foreign born. In Spain, we have an estimated of 14 to 15. with the difference that Spain was an emigration country until we joined the European Union. By the way, Spain was in the list of underdeveloped countries of the World Bank until '84. So this is where we come from. And today we have 15% of our population that is there. So I think numbers matter because and not just numbers of immigrants, we are faced with an identity crisis in Europe. And this identity crisis has many roots, and I look at the clock and I see that it goes and goes. But one of the root causes is that Europeans do not any longer believe in the future. When Spain joined the European Union, and I'm sure that in Poland it's not that different. We joined, yes, for prosperity, but we joined for values. We didn't want, us Spaniards, we didn't want to be different. There was still a value orientation. Europe meant freedom and meant today Europeans, and this is the elites, the narrative of the European Union, which was about values and peace and the future, just transformed into prosperity, which means that when the crisis struck, our citizens found themselves that they couldn't look into the future with confidence, which we did. My generation did, and your generation, Danuta, did. This is what happens. And is this the matter of the elites? Well, yes, absolutely yes, but not just of the elites. We are going through huge changes, and it has been said in several of the presentations. These huge changes mean that in this uncertainty about the future, in this idea that we have been just living each generation better than the generation before, is this enlightenment idea that Kant explains so beautifully in the the humanity history from a cosmopolitan perspective. This is this progress of humanity. Today, Europeans that are at the core of all this enlightenment perspective, just we don't believe in the future. And yes, it is a matter for the elites. And I think that it is a matter for the elites have gone relativist. So remember the debate, and Vladimir Simasevich remembers that the debate on including in the preamble the Christian roots of Europe. Come on, it was not on the text of the legislative text, but on the preamble. This is the kind of things that give you that we are in a different identity crisis, clearly. And we have to face it because Vladimir Simasevich has said it. Migration is one of the facts. I mean, it's not that we want it or not. It's one of the facts we have to address and to help that it goes in agreement with the institutional and legislative framework.
Yeah. I'm extremely happy that you mentioned facts, because indeed there are facts. You mentioned Sweden, and there are facts of life which we have to take seriously. They have impact on people. But also there's a lot of myth about the refugees and migrants, and there are statistics that are very clear, hard statistics, hard data, proving that 9 of 10, 86% of the migrants and refugees across the globe, we see them, 86% of them, they reside in what Włodek was saying, it's not an adequate word in developing countries. So only around 10% is really coming to Europe. And when we look at this refugee migration challenge through the media, through what we see on TV, people have the impression that everybody is coming to Europe, that all those people who flee the war, who flee the poverty, they come here and they all look like if they were young, strong men, potential terrorists. We don't know the data as ordinary citizens. We are not open maybe even to listen to the real data. We don't realize that half of those are kids, that there are so many women in those movements. So I think that there is both the humanity perspective and also the common sense perspective. Then there are very interesting now data recently published comparing the real presence or share of migrants and refugees in individual countries and people's perception. And here we have in Europe the country where this difference between the real presence of migrants and refugees and the perception is Poland. Nearly 5 times more migrants and refugees we have according to the perception that we really have. Similarly, you have in Japan, but then you have Spain, which you mentioned, which has a very actually positive experience with migration, I would say, also in terms of the effectiveness of the policy there. We have Spain where it's 1.6, the difference between the reality and the perception. So I think there is, what is missing probably is an active role of what we call elites of the governments, of authorities at different levels to explain to the public. Because we have also clear data that over the last 10 years, 70% of increase in employment, so the employment could increase over the last 10 years in Europe thanks to migrant. And it was not the case that they were taking away, like Brits complain, the jobs from the white people or from Europeans. It was the jobs which were not taken by Europeans. So the problem is that we have this, when I say that we have a problem, a crisis, there is crisis because we don't want those migrants, because our mindset today in Europe, I am trying to find a sort of general observation, not specific, but the general mindset is that Islam means refugees and that means terrorism. And I don't know if you remember, but you are strongly also involved in America, that when the Americans have interned the Japanese in 1940s, it was because they looked like perpetrators. So today also our public is against the refugees because they look like terrorists. And we are not really fighting this approach. So as a result, in spite of the fact that because of demography, we will need a lot of migrants to maintain our living standards in the years to come, we are a society, a population of those who do not like migrants. So I worry whether this humanity and common sense can come back to Europe.
I mean, Danuta, on this, I'm going to disagree with you.
Yeah,
of course,
that's why
we need migrants. Spain is a case in point. We are an aging society, but there are many other aging societies. But you say it's between common sense and humanity. Well, first, let's remember that the Polish plumber just sank the constitutional referendum in France. So, who the other is, it's not just, I think that we have to make the differences. Of course, Islamic immigration is an issue. But I think that this fear about the future, this lack of self-trust and confidence in the future. And where am I to disagree? Because frankly, I don't think that it is between the common sense and the humanity. No, it's between law and interest, not values, law and interest. Refugees, we have a legal duty. We are bound by the Geneva Conventions, and by the way, the Geneva Conventions in 1951 were meant for those that were escaping communism from here. The Geneva Convention and the Protocol of 1967. Refugees is one category, and immigrants, it's our interest. Spain needs immigrants because we are an aging society. But I mean, we should be able to have a policy that in my case, and I say this, when I was in government, we tried to promote immigration from Latin America. And I think that unless, I mean, we cannot just be bound by guilty feelings, which many times our half policies are driven by guilty feelings. No, immigration is about my interest. I'm Spain. People that come from Latin America speak my language. Just they have a common set of values, understand the family the way I do. Why is it bad to privilege this immigration? On the other hand, Spain, and I speak about the European jargon, the country I know best, I'm bound by treaties, I'm bound by human rights conventions, and I owe protection to those that fulfill the requirements of the Geneva Conventions and the legislation around. But I was asked point blank the other day by a journalist, if there is an Afghani that has his request for asylum denied, would you send him back to Afghanistan? And he said, well, I would observe, study, etc. But after that, yes, absolutely, because unless we keep a difference between what our duties under international law and our interests under our economic circumstances, demographic circumstances, we will never come out. And I know you have said, for people, it's not that it's that nobody has said. Nobody is saying, when you read, when Chancellor Merkel made this, it's open for refugees, immediately she justified that because we need young people. No, if they are refugees, it's because you are bound by international treaties. Then you may organize all kind of, passerelles between being an asylum, being granted asylum and being an immigrant. But it's two categories. And I think that this is backlashing against all of us. So first thing, intellectually, we have to be very clear. And if we believe in institutions, if we believe in the law, which we do, let's call a cat, and let's not mix immigration, interests, aging population with refugees. It's two categories.
I would have great problems myself if I could say that I disagree with you on the law. I absolutely fully share your view, and the problem is that there are, again, our elites, there are member states, there are governments who are not prepared to respect the law which already exists, both in the member states themselves, but also at European level, because the lack of willingness to cooperate, lack of willingness of member states to transpose the already existing European laws related to asylum seekers, related to Dublin, related to the whole migration issues. The Commission has launched in 2015 only 40 infringement procedures against member states in the context of migration policy. So I think there is this legal aspect which we have very clearly respect. But let me go back, because you mentioned Mrs. Merkel, and I belong to those who on this who I would like to defend what she did, because I think we often, in this narrative about what was happening and what we could see on TV, it was that Mrs. Merkel decided unilaterally to open German borders. They were open. They have never been closed, because at that time we still had the Schengen. So these 800,000 people were basically there. So if she did not make these gestures through which she just recognize the fact that migrants can create a problem can actually destroy the Schengen, they can break Schengen, they can destroy unions. So she made this very bold state, and politically very costly, as we could see it immediately, to change the attitude of the public. That's how I read her gesture and her statements. But immediately in Poland, we had this interpretation that we are expected to take migrants or refugees through quota from Germany, but that was not the case. There's one more myth about this quota issue and what we were supposed to do and what some member states are doing, except for Hungary and Poland, I think, where we have still the zero on our account of taking from the quota. That was about the situation in Greece and in Italy, and about the camps there. And we were supposed to help with this procedure of recognizing those people coming to our borders as refugees. And then they are free, because once they are in a union, once we would recognize through the procedure on our territory, we would recognize them refugees, they would be free according to Geneva and other probably international laws, they would be free to go where they want. We cannot keep them. But we didn't want to participate in this procedure, which was costly, timely, where we have expertise, it's not true. We have also possibilities of having this procedure. So that's what this unwillingness to cooperate, I think, led finally to this kind of beggar your neighborhood migration policy, and including the building fences, which I know you have experience with Melilla and with Africa on this, with your territories in Africa. So I think that as a result maybe of this unwillingness, we continue to have this piecemeal approach, a little bit here, a little bit there, depending on the reactions, and this is something which I think finally leads to the fact that the crisis continues.
Well, two things. First, Schengen. Of course, Schengen had a problem, is that it was not complete. It did not just address the protection, the common protection of the external borders. And this for many reasons, but among others, and this is very short-sighted, because many border countries did not want to have Europe there, because this security of the frontier is one of the core sovereignty felt issues. So now, the problem of the frontiers is what has backlash at us. And again, I will take the country I know best. Yes, we were criticized because in Ceuta and Melilla we have fences. Why we have fences? Because we took seriously to protect the external border. When Letta was prime minister, he had a Mare Nostrum to patrol the Mediterranean and avoid that people would get drowned there. You know the response of the European Union, and in the first place of Germany, in those years, I'm speaking about 2001 to 2015, Spain, this is your issue. We will look the other way. You have your bilateral agreements with Mauritania, with Senegal, with the sending and transit countries, but no, this is not for the European Union. To Enrico Letta, you have this, because the Italians wanted this to be a European program. No, this is your issue, Italians. Until, honestly, I don't want to criticize Chancellor Merkel, and this is big brushstrokes, but frankly, until this was an issue for Germany, because we have been having people getting drowned and people flooding Italy, Greece, for many years. But it was a problem when it became an issue for Germany. And frankly, Danuta, I wish they had at least told us. It was a decision taken by Germany, developed by Germany. And do I agree with you that now there is a common approach? We have to comply with it. Again, law. We are bound by the law. We approve that. We have to take the quotas. We have to show solidarity, because this is the essence of Europe. But frankly, to say, there are many explanations for what Germany did. And frankly, it didn't stop there, because the agreement with Turkey was a German agreement, bilateral agreement, and then the rest approved. But this is not the way to go. And again, for our populations, if I'm not mistaken, in Poland you have 1% of foreign population.
0.3.
0.3. And coming from Ukraine, I think that we dismiss this xenophobic people that don't know. I think that we should just be better at explaining what's going on, what is the advantages, and I think that we have a lot to be blamed for. And frankly, this is not just for us. I think that what has happened in the United States with the election just shows that, you know what, you may dismiss people, but these people are citizens. They have a right to vote, and they have and we have a responsibility to listen to them.
Well, in Germany you have, if I remember correctly, 10 million people who have roots in migration, so who come from migration with migration roots, but you have 16 million people also who do not have citizenship of Germany, so it's more than 10%, I think, the average, so Poland 0.3. So we have very different situations in Europe, and also on fences, if I can say, it was different about Ceuta y Melilla than it is on the continent here, but it also depends on when you build fences, physical fences, because we heard about this need of building fences. It was Croatia and Serbia, the border of Hungary at the beginning. It's in the moment when you also have this risk of building fences, mental fences or emotional fences among citizens, which I think is in long term extremely dangerous. But also when we talk about all those things that finally led to lack of solution at this stage, you might remember that because your sister was in this commission, I remember with me, when we had Antonio Vitorino proposing at that time the border and coastal guard, but it was a non-starter because I remember discussions in Poland. There was no way that we could adopt a sort of a body that would lead to somebody, I don't want to mention Germans in this context, but they were mentioned protecting Polish border. So it went to a drawer for many, many years, and now this coastal and border guard was back on the agenda, but not at the beginning of the crisis, where protecting external borders were fundamental at the beginning, but we didn't want to discuss it. So it's only now that we have the law, which was very quickly adopted also by European Parliament, but it will probably take again 2 or 3 years to implement, to put it in place. So there is this question that we are maturing, understanding, and awareness comes very slowly on many important issues. But I would like to push you, because the time is really moving, to push you a little bit into discussing the Polish case, if we can, because I think also it was mentioned today that the history in Poland against the refugees, it appeared in the moment, it was created in a moment when there was no single refugee on our border, so it was a little bit difficult to discuss. And also I remember myself talking to many mayors, groups of people 2 years ago, when I would say that there were more people wishing to help refugees than there were refugees. I mean, then we had potential migrants. We had a very bad electoral campaign where this notion of ethnic nationality, not to say ethnic nationalism, was really put very strongly on the agenda. And then we noticed that there's a shift in the way Poles, I don't know if think or we just revealed something which was a deeply hidden emotion, but all of a sudden we just got this terrible skepticism about refugees, which is coming also from the fact of total lack of education on how to live in diversity, total lack for years, I think it's not the current year, but of years of lack of migration policy, of really preparing for such a situation. So I think that we are now with this idea which is alien to modern societies when we discuss this ethnic thing and religious, and we are, I think we are in Europe 12 years, and Europeans normally are open to this sort of hyphenated identity where you have a Polish or European Pole or whatever we could have. So this hard identity of Poles, I think it's impossible to think that a closed culture can develop, it can just be weakened. And we have this cultural issue mentioned often by our politicians going to Brussels with national agenda to discuss issues. So we have a problem.
Yeah, well, first on fences. Of course, culturally, viscerally, we are against fences. This is our culture, this is our identity, and I'm saying here in Krakow, you know even better than I do. But what we cannot is just be patronizing and just dismiss whatever. No, I think that we have to be proactive and take our responsibilities and not dismiss the other. Now, on Poland, I'm very respectful, and I have had my experience in government, our bilateral, and we were a conservative, central-right conservative, and you had a socialist government, and we had a great experience. Having said that, I'm sometimes bewildered by what I see from your present government, honestly, because, and I try to understand it, and I don't. On this, Spain, we may come from, same approach to the Union, but we are very different. We don't have this knee-jerk just prevention against the other as we see today. I think, frankly, this is I don't want to criticize, but I think there is a responsibility of the government. And yes, we are in an intergovernmental moment in the European Union where everybody goes there, tries to get the best they can, and never think about the best solution within a European solution. And you know, if a government, if the elites, the government doesn't do that, how can we ask the Poles? I think there is another, and I see it in many other areas, is that you have a reluctancy to give up sovereignty, much more than we do. And I think that this is your history. Yeah. And what we need to do, starting with the European Commission, is to be much more forceful, and instead of being patronizing, just get to the battlefield of what's going on, of these prejudices, of this, and just explain and get to these echo chambers in the internet where people, because the problem is information doesn't flow. There is not an interest in being informed. There is an interest of being reassured that things will not change. It's fear of the world. It's not any longer a European world, and probably not to a certain extent a Western world. And there is a reptilian brain somewhere that just makes people react, and this is everywhere, in France, in Italy. It has different manifestations, but it's there. Again, I think that once you join a club, and this is what I'm saying, I will try to measure, be a diplomat, which is not my forte, especially now that I'm a free spirit. I don't have to report to anyone. But I think, honestly, you have to be consistent. If you have accepted certain rules of the club, if there is an agreement to have quotas, well, you accept quotas, and you know, with all the consequences. But what you cannot have is, as the French say, le beurre et l'argent du beurre. To have it both ways, to keep being sovereign for whatever you want, and to keep having Europe behind to help you wherever you want.
Yeah. Well, the problem, I think, in Poland, you see, we need this type of messages very strongly in Poland, but we don't hear them often. That's why what Prime Minister Cimoszewicz said, that we should have this debate, I think, which Europe needs a debate, but in Poland it could be this type of events like this one, and but we need really a critical mass in redebating Europe. That was also clear in what Minister Daniel Rotfeld said at the beginning, and if you look at what happens with the CETA, with the Canadian agreement, what will happen probably with TTIP one day, even on trade, we have not debated for 2 decades probably in Europe, so we have to go back to this. But going back to Poland once again, because what we see in Poland, and migration has been one of those examples, that it's extremely easy to divide society and to create this pretext to make people willing to divide, to have different opinions. And on migration, it happened because also the populism, of course, always feeds from, gets the food from migration discussions everywhere. And when the populism is mainstream, it's getting even worse. So we have a divided societies because we don't have in Poland, like I see often in Spanish television, we don't have debates on ideology, on values. Our party system, I think, does not get involved in this type of discussion, so people are very easily manipulated and they can shift positions on every new issue practically which was introduced into public debate or policy discussion. We have immediately the divided society. So let's hope that we will be able as society to cope with our populism. But I wanted to say that the challenge for Poland and for Europe is really to try to create an environment which would be migration friendly. We are the fastest aging society in Europe, and that's absolutely clear. But are we able to create such a migrant friendly society? We can look, I hope you will look at the example of difference between Estonia and Lithuania, how they handled, and in Estonia they all stayed. The migrants from Lithuania, they all fled probably to Nordic countries or to Germany. I know we have to be as two women an example of finishing on time, so I will not go further, but I would like to thank very much.
But let me just say one sentence. I mean, Poland has managed a much bigger challenge than migration. So I'm confident that you will, and it's important because you are leaders in this area of the world, and you have an important role to play in the European Union. So that's my last word.
Anna,
thank you.
We will make it, don't worry.
Absolutely.
I am sure.
I
so
have
thank you very
no
much.
doubt.
Thank you.